Okay, we decided to have a dialogue. We are three people who attended a school called GDS, Georgetown Day School, together. Some of us from kindergarten, some of us from third or fourth grade, some of us went all the way through to high school, and some of us came and went. That would be me. And some of us came and went, and that would be Mr. Fowler on the end over there. This conversation, I hope, we'll go a couple of places that are useful for collecting tools for mental health because we three have a mutual friend, and our lovely Ornella Mata Figueroa is the tech support. We have a dear friend who died way too young, and his name is Psyiah Bennett. And some of the people who are receiving this will probably know him, but I wanted to spend at least 30 minutes talking about what we saw in his life that was done right and what was done not so right and what contributed to his exiting the planet. He did not suicide. What he did was died, as I would say, as a result of side effects from his psychiatric medications. And I know
Really?
other people may have other stories, but he was on a medication that has a known side effect of really dramatic diabetes. And my understanding was he died of diabetic ketoacidosis, which is when your sugars just go so high they can't control them at all
Mm.
anymore. And that's my understanding. So again, I couldn't find any information on the internet at all, not an obituary, nothing. And that was the other reason I wanted to circle us all up with a lovely little candle here because I wanted to remember somebody who I thought was young, gifted, and black and deserved to
And
have.
Jewish.
And Jewish, exactly,
Correct.
exactly.
Correct.
Yes.
Black and Jewish. Yeah, please. The bicultural piece is a huge piece of what I think contributed to what gets called in psychology psycho schizophrenogenic. That's when something actually drives you crazy. It was
Hmm.
supposedly, according to Freud, your mother, but could be anything. So once upon a time, we had a friend. So how about a couple of rounds of just what was brilliant and beautiful about Psy when you knew him, and maybe what did you see as signs of trouble? And I'm going to start. I fell in love with Cy in the third grade when we were at the Smithsonian and we were doing some kind of natural projects where we had notes and we were taking notes and taking notes. And he was just my note taking buddy. We were at the same place all the time. And it was the first time I'd met anybody who was like a certain kind of smart that I have. Okay. And we stopped being competitors in that third grade class and started to be circling each other in an interesting way as here's another really smart person, but what do I do with them and what do they do with me? So that's one thing that I thought was really wonderful. One thing that I thought was to me a sign of problems was his parents because Cy never said anything good about his mother when I was around him. And the next phase was seventh and eighth grade. So Cy had a white Jewish mother and a black African slave descent father. And his father felt to me like a perfectionist in ways that I thought might be troublesome. And I don't know about the relationship between his parents, but it didn't sound like it was terribly good. So that's my round one of a brilliant, beautiful human being and clouds on the horizon. You can take your turns or I can call on you. How about you, Otis?
Yeah, Otis.
Um,
Tell us some.
the first thing I'd say is that Cy he was my friend, a great friend, um, and I thought he was absolutely brilliant, just incredibly brilliant, and everything we did, everything we talked about, he knew more about it than anybody on the planet, it seemed. So, his home life, um, yeah, he had a mother and a father, and that was about it to me. I mean, they didn't they didn't really interact together. I never really saw the parents interact together. Um, his father was odd, another bright individual, but he had some really strange habits and things of that sort. So I didn't really concern myself with much of the home life. He spent time at my home, and I spent time at his, and we enjoyed each other's company, and that was really about it. I mean, we were kids. We were teenage boys, you know, and we hung out and played basketball and things of that sort, and had meals together, and that was about it, really.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, my turn. Wow. Psy, well, OPME and I were joking about this. I mean, he was Captain Kirk when we played Star Trek. What else do you need to know? And I remember that he was one of the few people at Georgetown Day who ever got to skip a grade. That almost never happened. But I remember he skipped from second into third with us.
Actually, it was from first into second.
Was it first into second?
Yes.
Okay. I just remember that he got to skip, and that was very rare. I also remember his mom and his dad, but not together.
Right.
And something I've wondered about is he was very proud of his dad's association with Morehouse. And my impression is that his dad must have been away a lot, because I thought that while we were at GDS, his dad was teaching at Morehouse. Does that sound right? Because I thought dad was gone a lot and that was where he went. Maybe not.
No, I don't remember that as being the truth. No.
Okay, because I remember when he told me where he was going to college, and of course it was Morehouse. I thought it was partly out of that affiliation.
I definitely believe it was out of the affiliation. It was out of the affiliation that he went to Morehouse, but I don't think his father was a professor or an academic at Morehouse. I think he was an alum from
Okay.
Morehouse.
Okay, then I may not be remembering very clearly, but I think Psy probably could have gone anywhere he wanted, but that's where he chose to go. And again, my impression, I didn't know him at the time that he was really having the crisis that happened when he started college, and maybe it was a lot of things catching up with him. I don't know. I spent a lot of time with Psy towards the end of his life. We were both in DC. We were both kind of in bad shape. And Leslie Matrotti, the art teacher, came and found us. And she said that out of all the kids she'd taught, she had really wanted to find the two of us. And she said she remembered Psy, I think, putting his hand up and talking about his name, which was a really unusual name. And he explained about how his dad had created it. But I mean, it seems to me like for the first few years I knew him, he was Psy CY. And then later on, he wanted to be Psy with the, PSY spelling. And anyway, at the end, he was very heavy. He was smoking a lot. And I don't remember exactly where he was living. I think he was living with a relative. And he was trying to get some work teaching math. And I don't think that was going too well. He graduated from UDC after some time, but you guys will probably remember that.
I do.
Yeah. It took him a while to kind of get it together and finish, and he got a degree in math. And then I just remember spending time with him, and I was so glad to see him, but he asked, I don't know really how to say this, like, could we be a couple?
Mhm.
And I was flattered, but I just said, Psy, it's like you're my brother. I mean, I grew up with you, and I just think of you as like you're, yeah, I mean, it would be incest.
But that's really
uh,
interesting because I want to talk a little bit about isolation and how old was he when he died? I don't remember how old he was. Does
early
anybody have
30s,
the exact age?
No. Early 40s.
early 40s.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I thought I didn't think he made it
yeah,
I
to
didn't
be
think he
40.
made it to 40 either.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Tell us
I'm
more, Otis.
estimating it was around 1997,
That
98.
sounds right.
So
Okay.
that would have
Okay.
given him maybe
Oh,
39 or 40. Yeah,
actually, that does sound right, because I'm thinking about when I came back to DC. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That does sound right. Of course, he was a year younger
Right.
than, so, but anyway, yeah, that's basically it. It just seemed like he was a lost soul.
Well,
So speaking of that and going back to the high school end, his
Mhm,
name says to me a lot about the relationship piece because CY was how I knew him too,
mhm,
but his
mhm.
father birthed him with a difficult name,
Yeah.
Psyiah,
mhm,
Yes.
and that felt like his dad. That he gave this kid a whole bunch of burden. There was like a lot of weight on Psy.
Mhm,
And Morehouse, as the place that it all unraveled, I
mhm.
don't think it's a coincidence it is a traditionally Black college. And I wanted to say that because I wanted to talk you, Otis, Susan, me, about
mhm.
the goings and the comings of GDS. Because
Sure.
GDS was a very protective place in
Mhm.
a way.
Mhm,
And I was really happy that I had gone away for I guess fifth and sixth grade, come back for seventh and eighth, then gone to public high school
mhm.
because I looked at you all who went all the way through Robbie Bick, you, Susan. Everybody went to the graduation and they got one of Mrs. K's lays around their
Oh,
neck.
oh, I
For
didn't,
high
I
school.
didn't just want to say I didn't because I came in first grade, but yes, I remember Jane, Donna, Cy, Robbie. Yeah, there's a picture
Lincoln.
of, and Lincoln, yes, there's a picture
Yes.
of about half a dozen people standing there with those
Those
lays.
beautiful Hawaiian lays. But I think there was a disadvantage to going from the shelter of GDS out into the real world.
Mhm.
And Otis, maybe you can speak to that because you hit that in high school.
I didn't think about that until much later. Um, I don't know who knows this, but my daughter actually graduated from GDS also, and so
Really?
she's, oh yeah, yeah, 2007. So
Hmm.
she had that experience, that GDS experience. Went to University of Virginia, and so I guess there's some mild similarities there. But she did the public school in the beginning, so I don't know. I don't know if where the similarities
I just know
start. And
that the transition from the questioning kind of open academic environment of GDS was very hard for me. And I managed it fairly well since I didn't have any nervous breakdown issues until I was in my late 40s. But there was always this piece of was I questioning things too much? And when I went to Howard, it wasn't for college, but for medical school, I would not have made it through the other end if I had not been able to transfer across town um, by my
Mm.
third year. And I wonder about Morehouse uh, because of having gone to a traditionally Black school and Psy not being Black enough. So
Mm.
that's when that in at GDS he was too Black. He was the Black kid that was having us all go on a strike, against reading whatever it was that Meliz wanted us to read, Joel Chandler Harris, he's not going to speak dialect, and the whole
Mhm.
class is following him, right? That kind of thing didn't look good in the Howard University that I went to. I found it very strict. So I wonder
Mhm.
about just the difference in academic environments,
I, I,
how much that contributed
Yeah.
to
I'm not
inequality.
sure. I did the HBCU
Hmm.
experience
Hmm.
as well, and uh, I was thinking that it's always going to be something at an
Yes.
HBCU.
Yeah.
Either you're, like you said, too black or not black enough. So my experience was a little bit different, obviously.
Hmm.
I can't speak for Cy. I mean, he did not
Hmm.
ever say to me, "Hey, I'm having trouble here for this reason or another." I mean, he just kind of just 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 threw it on me, saying that he experienced a nervous breakdown, and it was absolutely shocking to me to hear him say that. So it came
When
out of
did
nowhere.
he, yeah, when did he tell you that? At what age?
I'm thinking again, it was the end of our freshman year, somewhere around that time.
Hmm.
So that would have been, um, 1976, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I am hopeful that schools offer more support and counseling than I saw people getting at Howard, and that I saw people getting at Mount Holyoke, my college, too. So I think it's a very tender and often fragile age
Mhm.
for people. And we don't, in this culture, give enough supports around that time. So, Susan, you got the end of life story. Did he ever reminisce about that time period when he actually had his extreme state and whatever crisis? Did he talk about that at all with you?
I seem to remember that he talked a little bit about it shortly after it happened. I must have been back in DC for a visit, and he was not very clear about what it was that brought it on. Just that something happened. He was not in school, and I don't remember much about it. But I do want to add this. This is partly because of a conversation I had with Lincoln Pitts about a time at GDS. Neither of you were there, but it was in high school. And there was a group of Black kids who had not been in GDS in the early grades, and they were kind of pulling away and they wanted to sit by themselves. And so I was not part of that group. And neither was Lincoln, but I asked him about, what sort of not trying to sound like the white girl going, but why don't you want to be friends with me anymore? But because it wasn't really like that. But Psy, interesting. I mean, and this is Psy with the fro and the dashiki and everything, being really like, yes, I'm Black, I'm proud. I don't remember him being part of that group. I don't remember him cutting off friendships with people who could not belong to that group. So I think that even with that really strong identity that he was trying to have, that didn't happen. Um, because I remember that, and I'm thinking about like sophomore, junior year in high school, he was part of a group that included Jane and me and Guy Heinsohn. And
White for people who don't know these
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. um and a few others, but I mean, Jane's a strong personality too. I think of her as being like the other really dominant personality in the group. But yeah, it was I remember Cy, Lincoln has told me a bit about what Cy was like outside of school. And I know there were relationships that I was not part of that I can't speak to, but anyway, I just wanted to say that piece. And then at the end, um, Leslie had wanted to track him down because she remembered him as just being so bright. And
Yeah, that bright piece is also a big part of how do you get through when you're not like anybody else. I mean, we were all sort of cultivated into a uniqueness. You know,
yeah,
GDS wants you to be yourself and express yourself, but when yourself doesn't fit anywhere and you want to fit somewhere, I think that can
mhm,
be complicated. Um, I remember going back to public high school because I wanted to tackle all the things I hadn't been able to feel comfortable with when I left. You know, I wanted to be a jock and I wanted to be National Honor Society and I wanted to be uh, in the theater group and I wanted to do it all. So when you
mhm.
have the capacity to do it all in a culture that really asks you to change, you know, to sit in one box or another box, I think that can also be difficult for people. So, what tools did you see him using that were useful? I mean, certainly overeating and smoking weren't two of them. I mean,
Mm,
let's be honest, right?
mhm.
I saw him as the way he used knowledge was really, really, I would say, unique, and it rubbed off on me. And I'm really impressed that I'm an active learner a lot because of dating Psy and all those like long hours on the phone
Right.
in seventh and eighth grade. What, I don't even know when it was. I can't get the times straight, but somewhere in there, we were dating, talking a lot, and talking with him was always talking about big things. It wasn't just, you know, talking about what was on television the night before.
Right. One thing that comes back to me is I remember we were probably like 10, 11, and we were all passing around Superman comic books. And Cy said, "There's a black Superman. It's an African legend. And this is a man who has like superhuman powers and he can fly." And I mean, who else would know that?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh
So,
my goodness.
relationship wise, what would happen differently if we could um, talk about some of the stuff going on in our homes? You know, I had parents who were estranged most of my life. They stayed together, and it seemed like everybody else at GDS had divorced parents. And I was so
Yes,
jealous. I wish my parents would divorce and
me
they could
too.
fight over me, and then I could have the ski trip with daddy and the, you know, trip to the Jamaica with mommy like the other kids. I remember thinking that. And I'm thinking about how difficult it is when you have parents who don't get along, but they stay together. And then I did the other way and divorced, and I see how difficult it was for mine when, you know, like there's no right way, but then
Right.
relationships in the home matter.
Yeah. Well, I think a big difference that you're talking about is the person I was closest to with this was Jane, and her parents were really obviously not getting along. And her parents did not do the thing of, okay, it's winter break, so you're going to go skiing with daddy, and then you're going to come back and go to Florida with mom and mom's new husband. I saw a lot of relief, but also a lot of turmoil about there was a lot of fallout. But I think, like, I thought that your parents were really cool, OPMA.
Many people
But
did. My
yeah,
parents are
they,
theater people. They do a
of
great job
course,
putting on a play.
of course, and maybe they should have adopted me. Um, but your parents weren't visibly not getting along.
Right.
And I also wish that my mother and stepfather would get divorced because it was horrible and they never had a good marriage. But if you're talking about Cy, I, you know, his mom would show up sometimes when there were parents doing things with the class, but I don't remember her participating. I just remember her being there.
Mhm.
And this was Cy's role model for what a woman is. I'm playing armchair shrink here.
Mhm.
So I remember a very large woman who was very passive.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm
Go ahead.
thinking back on all the time I spent with Cy at his house, and how little I actually saw his mother when we were together at the house. Again, I didn't think much of it. Um, Cy and I were being guys. We were laughing at silly stuff and playing goofy games. And when we actually did go out of the house and we needed a ride, Pop provided it, and that was it.
Yeah,
And his father was the person that drove us around before he could drive, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
I'm just
right.
thinking he talked to me about feeling or believing that his mother had committed suicide. So she officially died of uh, her being overweight and having florid diabetes. That's
Hmm.
officially what she died of. But he said something about her having placed flowers.
Yeah.
Otis, you're nodding your head. So, what was the story that you
I,
got?
I just vaguely remember him saying something about a tree in the yard.
Yeah.
But it was something like that. I don't know exactly what it was.
So, he definitely had a concern that his mother had committed suicide, and then his father died in a traumatic way in a tractor accident. So,
Mm.
I know that we are now just starting to really look at how much trauma we hold in our bodies and what we do with it, and how we don't have the tools to move to another place of more wellness. And all summer, in what would the year be? The year we went to Operation Desert Storm. I always have to count years by my children's age.
Well,
Cy and
it's
I talked. What was it?
Bush. W. Bush was president, so it was the early
Okay,
2000s.
the
What
early
wasn't it?
aughts.
No,
Yeah,
no,
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 no, or was it 90?
90.
Okay, the 1990s.
Yeah, so it's like 91,
1990s.
around 91.
Yes.
Okay, so
In
it's the
that
first
time
Bush.
period. Yeah, I remember Cy sounded like he was trying to do a lot of figuring out his life, and figuring out what he wanted to be doing, what he was doing, and where he was going. And a piece of it felt like it was about his sexuality too. So when
Hmm.
we got together, and I am a bisexual woman, I wasn't feeling a heterosexual man connecting with me. And what I'm saying is, there's something we talk about, gaydar. I just
Yes.
wonder, yeah, I wonder about whether he had the space to express who he wanted to be. I don't know. I just think it's interesting. You said towards the end of his life, he was looking for some kind of deeper relationship, somewhere with someone, and that it wasn't happening. So is that what I got from you?
Um, I don't know why he asked me, do you want to be my girlfriend? If that was just like, I'm lonely, maybe you're lonely, maybe we're both in the same kind of place, and maybe that's the basis for something. I don't know if it was that. I didn't think it was like he was telling me, I've had a big crush on you since third grade. It was just sort of, would you like to be there for me? Because I need to be needed.
Which is another thing that we're trying to help people figure out: how do we tend each other and befriend each other rather than fight, flight, freeze, or fawn in our stress responses.
Yes,
So, and how about the medications? Because it sounded like, again, Susan, you knew a lot about what he was doing, and that he was on psychiatric medications and taking them, not taking them, compliant, not compliant.
I am not sure. That was not something that he wanted to talk about a lot. He was more talking about, oh, where he was going to get money to buy another pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes he asked me for money. And I know he also had something like that going on with Lincoln. I think Lincoln was part of a group, and Otis, maybe you were part of this group too, that kind of looked after him a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he just, again, he would tell me sometimes when he thought he had a lead on something work wise, but I don't think it was going very well at any time. And so I am not really getting a clear picture of what happened from the time he left Morehouse, to the time that he went to UDC and finished. And
I can clear that up a little bit.
Thank you.
okay.
Um, he he called me to ask me to attend the 20th reunion, and
Yes.
I said, "Si, absolutely not. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not really part of that crew." And he said, "Otis, you got to come." And so I did. We got together. I had a great time. And Lincoln was there, and I guess Si was still in Alabama, I guess at the time, or somewhere other than DC.
Mhm.
And we decided after that Saturday event at the 20th reunion that he and I and Lincoln would get together and just hang out. And we went to dinner. I think we may have even gone to a baseball game or something. And Lincoln and I convinced Si that he was so close to a degree, he should come back to the DC area and finish up at UDC. I don't know if that was actually our suggestion. He had family in the area, and so we thought it was a good idea for him to try to finish up.
That sounds, from what I know from Lincoln, that sounds, yeah, yeah, I think that's what happened.
So yeah, we convinced him to come back to the area and do that, and he did, and we were quite happy that he was in the area and doing well. It seemed at UDC. So he finished in relatively short order uh, um, with a very high great GPA. I remember hearing about that and saying, I wish my GPA was that high when I finished with a mathematics degree. So yeah, that's how that worked out.
Mhm.
And what do you all know about his actual death?
Nothing, really.
I
Nothing except that I thought it was attributed to diabetes.
um I knew that Cy was having trouble emotionally. Um, I would get calls from him at very odd hours of the night, and with him rambling, asking odd questions, and I would just stop him and say, "Cy, are you okay?" And I remember one time in particular, he said um, something to the effect that either "No, I'm not okay," or "Yes, I am okay, but it doesn't matter. You'll come to my funeral." And
Oh, wow.
that really
Oh my God.
took my breath away. And I don't remember the timing, how much longer after that, but suddenly those phone calls, either late in the evening, early in the morning, they stopped, and I hadn't heard from Cy. And that's when I called Lincoln. I said, Lincoln, I'm fearing the worst. I know you know Cy's family. Please call them and check and see if he's okay. And that's when Lincoln called me back, I guess, a day later and said, the Cy passed away.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't honestly remember how I heard. I don't remember who told me, but I was not in contact with him at the time.
And I was not in contact with him, and I don't remember who told me.
Mhm.
Uh, but here we all are now. And I want to say, thank you for helping me put some order, like sequence
Mhm.
some of these things. As I said, peer support matters to me. I'm looking at a lot of young people who are having a lot of mental health issues. I'm looking at systems that are broken and
Mhm.
looking at what we can do in community situations to be supportive. And it's really good to know that, you, Otis, you, Susan, were supportive at important me were supportive at certain times in his life where he really needed that, and sometimes the support didn't come from
Mhm.
the institutions that you would think were doing this. And I wanted to put this together because I wanted GDS to hear and to think and to feel into what kind of support it gives its students once they're launched. Okay, because it's K through 12, but it's unique enough, even as it goes preppier and preppier and less whatever it was we had back in the day. Um, they create a certain kind of person. I want more responsibility for following us out into the world, because out into the world hasn't jived with the dreams and the visions they told us necessarily. Not that they were wrong. I'm just saying I would like that particular institution to take a look at this. I asked the same thing of my college, Mount Holyoke, because I was all over their alumni bulletins when I was successful. When I wanted to do an essay on failure, they turned me down.
Mm.
Mm,
And it was a year where I found out, because I was still in touch with the black female director of student diversity or whatever. They had an exceptional number of suicides. They had like 4 or 5 suicides
My
on
goodness.
campus in one year. So they really didn't want to hear about failure that year. But I just think it's important for us to look at what we can do to support people who are in distress. And it sounds like there were a couple of cycles of wellness and
Mhm.
distress along the way. And looking back, some of the tools I'm finding right now, I'm going to pass forward with whatever happens with this recording. One is that the Chicago area is doing a wonderful job of looking at cultural competency with respect to mental health. And there's a group called Sister Afia that's actually meeting this weekend. And they're supporting, they said, about 500 Black therapists and clinicians, supporting the therapists with wellness programs. So I want to send whatever we make as a recording to that group. There's
mm.
intentional peer support. Whoops. Intentional peer support in my very, very white Vermont area that wants to be supportive of mental health issues and often doesn't know what to do with anybody who's a little bit outside of their norm. So Psy would definitely be a story of somebody very outside of that norm. And then in the Boston area, there's a group called the Transformation Center. So these are 3 places that I'm going to be sending our little conversation to. And I wanted to just sort of wrap up in the next 5 or 10 minutes by asking you to, if there's anything you feel you would want people to know based on our story of this man moving forward with mental health support in the United States.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that Cy was diagnosed as bipolar at one point. Do you know if that was his diagnosis?
I do. At least that's what he told me. Again, another phone call I got from him, and I remember him saying, "Otis, I finally found out what my problem is. I'm bipolar." And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, of course, I had no idea what that really meant. But
Well, yeah, who did?
yeah, but I remember the conversation well with him. So yeah, he had been diagnosed, obviously getting some help of some sort, and so there was a diagnosis.
Do you know
Yeah.
how long into his um, problems? Like, was that right at the first year of college? Was it 5 years later? Was it
Oh no,
10 years later?
that was much
See,
later that he.
this that's really important because there's a book by Robert Whitaker called Anatomy of an Epidemic, where a lot of people have been getting diagnosed as bipolar over
Mhm.
the last 15 or 20 years. But that's a
Yes.
whole interesting story of the diagnosis and of the drugs and of, how useful they are. So there's a whole story there. But thank you for filling in that that piece, about that particular label. Yeah.
Mhm. And I also want to say something about GDS, which is that the ideals that we grew up with, I think it reminds me of, and I have not read the Voltaire Candide. I only know the Leonard Bernstein musical version of Candide. But when Candide is at school and he's being told by Professor Pangloss that they're living in the best of all possible worlds, I think I can see a link here with Psy and his identity crisis, because I think we grew up being told everything is, like things were really bad, but they're not bad anymore because we've had the civil rights movement and we're marching against the war. And we're just, by the time you guys are grown up, this is just not, this is going to be history. And I think the rude awakening was, no, that's not true. It's a pendulum. It swings backwards. And I can see the sort of liberalism, and I hate to put it like that, but I think there's a lot of it about how, well, we can have kids of all colors playing together. It doesn't matter where their parents came from. They come from different countries and different parts of the states, and see, they're all playing together. It's going to be great. And now I'm hearing stuff from my mom about how, yeah, they presented that, but look at how many people started pulling their kids out when the kids got old enough to date.
Yep.
And I wonder if part of Psy's expectations might have been, there's no need to look at that conflict about being biracial because it's all going to be non-existent. And of course it isn't, and it wasn't.
Well, I know that I carried that. I would not call it idealism, but a world. I carried that belief through another generation. So I produce biracial kids, and I
Mhm,
have the best of worlds and the worst of worlds in how they have responded to being biracial people
mhm,
in a world. One of them feels like they don't belong anywhere, and the other one is a go getter that just goes all over the place. But we have a language and we call it white passing now. She has an advantage of not having to disclose if she doesn't want to
mhm,
disclose. So
mhm.
again, Psy chose, yeah, Psy was not going to be white passing,
Yeah.
but um, it was an age where we were, as you said, encouraged to believe we could do anything. And
Yeah.
there's a piece of me that really thinks about the, the the creative support that's given to bipolar community people through the Icarus Project. Do you know of that one, Susan? The Icarus
No.
Project is it's a creative uh, art program. It's a magazine, and it's named for flying too close to the sun. So the
Mhm,
idea of people who have bipolar labels, but are also trying to recognize that they want some of their creativity. There's an issue with the drugs often being too heavy to allow for the creativity, so people being non-compliant with the drugs. So it gets to be a whole cycle. So I wonder how much of that was in there. But I'm concerned that Psy's creativity was there from when he was in the third grade and I met him. I don't think he was bipolar his entire life. He's got a dad that I really wonder about emotional abuse and neglect and trauma that's so low that it's sort of a low chronic drip 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 type of a thing. I wonder about this new diagnosis of everybody's Asperger's these days. Everybody
yes.
who's bright and doesn't do well with emotional literacy gets an Asperger's label. So we have a lot of labels that we put on people, and I do appreciate a story that helps me understand the human um, behind that bipolar label.
Yeah. I don't think that Psy was Asperger's. And I also think that if you're bipolar from the get-go, his was latent for a very long time.
Correct.
Uh, Also, talking about the school again, Georgetown Day had kind of a crummy way of dealing with kids who had problems. And I don't know if that was anything that Psy had to deal with or not, but certainly GDS when we were there was not a place to be if you had emotional problems. I remember the stigma of kids getting put into tempo, which was that class that Shirley Adams had for the kids who were in, I think, like fifth, sixth, seventh. They couldn't fit in any place else, so they went to tempo to go at their own pace. Psy was too bright for that, and he coped too well for most of the time to be in that. I also remember Psy writing poetry. I think we all do.
I still have
And
some of his poetry.
Yeah.
you do?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
Oh, it's wonderful. Wonderful.
I just remember there was a really long poem that got in the yearbook one year. Um, I think that's the only thing of his that I have.
Well, I
But
would like those from both of you.
Nope.
If I could get those from no,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course.
I would like those from both of you, and I want to bring it to a close because I'm not even looking at a clock, but I think this has been long enough. Looking at people's attention spans for whatever it is we put together. Ornella, our lovely tech support person, is there anything else you would want to hear before we close this down?
Oh, I have so many questions, but I won't ask them all.
well, then my question is this something do we need to have part 2 of this?
Good point.
If there are so many questions.
I would like to invite a couple of other people to a part 2 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one question as we close. First, what does this all mean to each of you?
Thank you.
And do you have any of the poetry close to maybe close out with some of Psy's words?
It would take me at least 5 minutes to get it, so I don't think that's close enough.
You know what? I have a
For
joke in
next
mind.
time.
I have this is not poetry, but I do remember a joke that Psy told probably when we were in our early teens. So I can tell that. And it's not poetic.
Not the signifying monkey. Not the signifying monkey.
No. It's the one about the parts of the body. Do you remember this one?
Tell it.
Okay. And I'll try to keep it concise.
So
Okay.
Susan, close with it and let us answer Ornella's question first. What does this mean to each of us? And then you close with that.
Okay, we'll do.
Can I ask for the order? I'd like to ask Susan to share what this means to you first, Susan. And then I'd like Mr. Otis, and then I'd like Opeyemi to finish. And then Susan, you can close out with the joke.
Wow. You know, we have recently had GDS reunions for our class, and they were online, and Opeyemi was at the first one and decided she didn't want to go back. But it's been very moving to me to see how the kids I used to be on the playground with, some of them are now grandparents, and that's just a way of framing that there are people who've gone through very big changes. I mean, some people are the same pretty much. They're just older and they have less hair or gray hair, whatever, but they're still the same person. Many of them are not in a lot of ways. And I wonder about what Psy would be like if he hadn't gotten off the train, so to speak, when he did. If, like, conversations I would like to have with Psy, because of my own diagnosis, I am not bipolar, but I have a condition that's very similar. And many people in my family are bipolar. These are conversations we didn't have, maybe we couldn't have. I wish we could have them now. So that's a part of what all this means. And also just he was the like the bright light that went out.
I guess my turn. Oh my goodness, where do I start? I love getting together with people that I share a significant portion of my life with, important part of my life, and that GDS experience lives with me every day.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I sent my daughter to GDS to get some of that as well. Psy was a significant portion of that. He was a friend, a great friend. We remained friends even when I was not at GDS attending. We remained friends after our high school days. We remained friends after our college days. So I enjoy talking about that friendship. I really hope that that this helps someone to have some understanding of mental illness, whether it's themselves or someone close to them. And I can only hope that this does uh, is something of value for someone. That's all.
And I called this circle. So what does it mean to me? What of all this means to me? To me, it has meant really getting more clarity on how much life can wound and um, make us more than we are at the same time. And I just feel like sequencing what happened with Psy helps me understand ways to help people where I see some of the red flags or the signs of becoming too isolated or uh, not not listening. So I think I learned what I didn't listen to back then and wanted to listen to now. Um, Things I heard, I can hear differently now that I've put little puzzles, the pieces together with you two. And some of the places where I wish I had picked up um, more and given this particular human more space to talk and speak from their heart about their life issues, because I don't feel like we have communities that to this day encourage that kind of exploration of self-doubt, ideas of where you might want to go that are like overreaching, like maybe Georgia Tech and Morehouse were overreaching to try to do both at the same time. I don't know. But making meaning has meant figuring out how to be more helpful with people who are still here by remembering in more detail somebody that I loved and cared about who didn't make it to where we are right now. Deep breath, and Susan will end us off with a side joke.
This is a side joke, so I will channel a little bit of Psy. Okay. Well, we know from reading the Bible about how God created man. And the night after man was created, the body parts all got together because they were arguing about who was going to be the boss. So remember, this is like a 14-year-old Psy talking here. So the legs are saying, well, we should be the boss because we move the body around. And the eyes are saying, but if it weren't for us, you would bump into things. It would be really terrible. And, so on. All the different body parts are talking. The brain is saying, yeah, but, it's all about me in the end, isn't it, folks? So I should be the boss. Suddenly the asshole speaks up and says, I want to be the boss. And all the other body parts just laugh and laugh. And, they're just, I mean, if they could fall on the floor, they were rolling on the floor. And they said, you're an asshole. You can't be the boss. So the asshole says, well, then I'm just going to plug up. So that's what this is Psy, right? So the asshole plugs up, and in no time at all, the legs are shaking and the eyes are bulging out of their sockets, and the brain can't can't function. So they all say, okay, we decided you can be the boss, asshole. You're the boss. So the moral of the story is you don't have to be a brain to be a boss. You just have to be an asshole.
Bada bang, bada boom.
Great
Yeah,
stuff.
thank you, folks. I'll be here all week.
So we'll put this together and get it in a form where you all can take a look at it, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. I want to say thank you very much. This just helped my heart tremendously.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Really cool. Great to see you both.
Oh, it's always wonderful to see you all.
Yeah.
So maybe